Welcome back to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My returning guests today are Jon Gentry, AIA Partner and Co-Founder, and Aimee O'Carroll, ARB Partner and Co-Founder of Go See in Seattle, Washington, and that's Go''C. Jon co-founded Go See with Aimee in 2012 after 9 years as a project architect in Seattle, working with several acclaimed firms. Growing up in rural North Carolina, he developed a deep appreciation for the landscape and a passion for creating structures that thoughtfully respond to their site and express their pragmatic functions. He believes architecture, when rooted in a hands-on, passionate process, has the power to elevate everyday experiences. Aimee, born and educated in the United Kingdom at the University of Cambridge and the Architectural Association, moved to Seattle to pursue architectural practice with Jon after working together transatlantically on several successful design competitions. Aimee is passionate about design as a collaborative process and enjoys finding opportunities in this process that blur the conventional perceptions of what we understand as architecture. Go See has been widely published and recently awarded AIA Emerging Firm of the Year in the Northwest and Pacific region. The project we're talking about today is the really cool new Alton Wines tasting room and wine garden in Walla Walla, Washington. Alton Wines is quietly tucked into a natural cove just outside of Walla Walla, where wave-like hills and vineyards shape the land. The site, once considered unfarmable due to its position and soil, offered a rare opportunity to build something that would not disrupt the landscape, but instead belong to it. As guests arrive, the architecture guides them southward along a vine-covered arbor made of a steel frame that leads directly to the heart of the experience, a tasting room and wine garden arranged across the site from east to west. Now, let's get into the details. Welcome back to Detailed. My returning guests today are Jon Gentry, AIA Partner and Co-Founder, and Aimee O'Carroll, ARB Partner and Co-Founder, both at Go See in Seattle, Washington. Super excited to have them back on the show. The project we're going to talk about this time is the absolutely gorgeous, I'm in love with this project, Alton Wines tasting room and wine garden in Walla Walla, Washington, which I've actually been there for their spring release weekend. So I have experienced the area. Jon and Aimee, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on the show. When you were here before, we talked about your Mini Mart City Park project. That so impressed me. I don't remember a whole lot these days. I'm not 20 anymore, but that project so impressed me that I've actually had conversations about the project multiple times and used it as an example in the class that I teach. So just kudos to you. I think it's an incredible project. Welcome back. How have you been?
Hey, good. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
You're welcome anytime. You keeping busy over there?
Yeah, we're busy. We've since moved into a new space down in Pioneer Square, 4 blocks from our old one, but much bigger, nice views to the west. It's a gorgeous day in Seattle right now. So yeah, we kind of built out a new space over the last year since we talked to you last.
Well, that's not, I need to remember next time I'm up in the Seattle office to just pop in and surprise you and say hello.
Definitely.
I was actually up there in December. We had our company Christmas party. We had a whole West Coast company Christmas party this year. And it was at the Fairmont in Seattle. Came up and spent the night and had our party up there. So I was close. Well, let's get going. Even if you've been here before, you have to do the icebreaker question,
Yeah.
just because, for no other reason than it entertains me.
I don't know.
And so, what I'd like to ask you is, tell me about one thing that you would like to see changed in our industry. Like, where could we be doing better?
I can start. I think there's a lot of great things happening in our industry right now, especially in the last 5 years. One thing, kind of, it's like a basic kind of studio thing, is that we try to do more of is keep it playful, not so serious all the time. Like that early process of being playful, doing hand drawings, building models, not for finished presentation's sake, but for exploration, I think is just something that we should continue to encourage and do more of.
Exercise
And
that creative muscle.
yeah,
Aimee?
definitely. I think for me, kind of looking back on the kind of education side of things, like had a lot of leeway in really creative exploration and concept exploration, which is amazing to have when you're learning about architecture. But I was lucky enough to have kind of like a small part of the hands-on approach to actually building and construction. And I think for students, like seeing how an exterior assembly is put together and doing it yourself, you learn so much. And I think a lot of people come out of school and it's a really hard concept to get your head around, and to grasp sort of what those elements are and what they really mean without physically doing it and seeing yourself. So I'd love to see that kind of across the board for everyone to get their hands dirty and build something and really kind of understand it. And then you can kind of learn much more from there and how details work. But it can be really tough otherwise, I think, when you get dropped into the work environment where you just sort of haven't got a clue.
Well, you're preaching to the choir there. I actually just got back from Savannah, where I did a presentation on how to work more effectively with younger professionals, and understanding the differences between the generations, and how we can't be more seasoned. I like to say spicy, and presume that we think or operate the same way. As I have a millennial and a Gen Z son, and that's all three of us approach everything we do in a different manner. But having sons that age, I think has well equipped me to work with younger professionals and to be open-minded and to not be willing to try something they suggest instead of the traditional top-down, shut up and do what you're told leadership that I had coming up. So I couldn't agree with you more, Aimee. Let's talk about this project that I'm madly in love with. Tell me about what was the client looking for? What did they want to achieve here?
Yeah, so it was an interesting kind of start to the project. These clients, or a couple, Seattle-based couple, they had actually been to one of our other wineries, Core Cellars, down the Columbia River Gorge. And they had, I guess, at some point previously decided that they wanted to sort of pivot their lives and go into the wine industry. And were beginning that process by going to wine school whilst they were working their regular day jobs. They visited our winery and I think just like loved the experience of being there, sort of a very relaxed atmosphere, very welcoming, and asked the owners who the architect was, and they got our name and came and met with us up in Seattle, and we hit it off. And it was just sort of one of those processes where we're working with them as they build their business and their brand. It was a really kind of exciting opportunity. I'm going out to the site with them to sort of see this area where they decided that the project was likely going to be. But they were really hoping to achieve that sort of similar atmosphere. I think in Walla Walla previously, it's kind of changed a bit now, but previously it was a bit more stuffy, I think, in the wine tasting world. Sort of you go in, you sit at the bar, you have your tasting, you leave, you get your bus, whatever, move on to the next spot. And they wanted to embrace a more kind of casual, relaxed feeling where you're invited to linger, to stay, to have events that complement wine tasting, whether that's dinners, kind of invited chefs. So just like a different way of looking at wine tasting than maybe Walla Walla had seen before. And I think they were excited to see what we could do with them to create a space that could accommodate all those different types of activities.
It's interesting to be in that role where, I mean, they were certainly managing the business planning of it, but we were kind of doing it alongside them in a way. We introduced, actually, one of the first things we did at our first meeting, we introduced them to a company called Shore. They're a graphic design, web design company, and they ended up building the entire brand for the bottling, the logo, the naming, a lot of the language. And having worked with Shore on other projects previously, we were kind of able to create some of that with them and know that the building was going to kind of align with that building of the business and brand together. So
we initially, after our first meeting, took them upstairs to Shore's office.
Yeah, we're in the same building at the time.
We know them really well and friends with them. And we're like, hey, you guys should meet.
They may even have hired Shore before us.
It was the beginning.
But we found ourselves in that kind of role of like sort of creating this business alongside. I think it's a good lesson for young architects and students too, is like, pay attention to graphic designers and what they're up to. You know, you're kind of maybe not going to be doing that work, but like you're going to be creating kind of architecture alongside it sometimes. I mean, it's a good opportunity when you do get that chance to kind of build a new business kind of around those ideas. So it was, and Shore do amazing work too. So if you go to the Alton Wines website, you'll see beautiful photography, beautiful graphics, and you know, the logo and bottling and everything. So it really makes the whole package.
What a unique experience to get to do that, and what a huge compliment. I mean, is there any better way to get a job than to have somebody walk into a building and like it so well they come hunt you down? I mean,
yeah, you kind of do dream about that early when you don't have a lot of built work. You know, 12 years ago when we were starting Go See, like, yeah, you're like, oh man, wouldn't it be great one day to have a client come to you because they've seen something you've done.
And the wineries, I think, are one of our biggest assets in that regard, because they're spaces that are sort of residential in scale in some way.
Right.
And kind of have aspects of what you might find in a home, you know, the atmosphere. And we've had a few projects come our way through people visiting both Alton and Sellers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kudos to you. We're going to work our way from the outside in on this project. So I am really interested in something I read in my research and the things that you sent me about this site. According to the project description, the building site is in a pocket in the middle of farmlands, but the pocket itself is deemed unfarmable.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, I'm trying to picture, I could not come up with anything in my brain as to why that, I looked at the map and where it's at and the pictures. So why was it unfarmable? I mean, it seems like a good place to put a building, but.
Yeah, it's sort of a unique spot. There's a huge sort of series of waves of landform that actually have had vineyards above, coincidentally, which is nice for us. But and then farmland, kind of more, I guess, arable farmland below.
We should point out the pocket too. This is a model of
right here
of the
for
project.
other people watching.
Oh,
The pocket that we're referring to is that kind of change in topography. It's sort of flat, but the vineyards are surrounding.
And then these waves kind of continue in various sizes. But I think the issue for the farmer was that his big, I don't know what they call it, you probably know, John, the crop equipment, the radius of those machines that kind of roll through the fields, couldn't really access the spot efficiently. So it was never really used, sort of a cutoff line in front of it. And yeah, he was kind of an interesting guy. We met with him when we went out there, and he'd been sort of actively looking for an idea for this spot. And I'm not sure how our clients connected with him, but I think they were probably out in Walla Walla looking for land and exploring, and got connected with farmer, and he really took the idea of the concept of having a building there that was really focused out on the amazing views of the Blue Mountains and could really make the most of this sort of slightly unusual space. And he'd been sort of reluctant in the past that anyone else use it, but it was the right fit for him. And it's sort of just one of those really kind of happy relationships that he, allowed them to build there.
Amazing meetup for them and they became friends. And because our clients were like looking in Walla Walla at,
Downtown.
commercial spaces. I mean, they were kind of looking all over. And then this conversation started and this friendship kind of was struck. And I think they ended up like negotiating like 100-year lease on the land. And, they're going to be there for their lifetime and maybe the next generations.
I call those messages from the universe when things just happen to all fall into place from such from unlikely places that I just believe that there's, I don't know if it's atoms or energy or what it is, but there's something that help push those pieces and parts together to make it happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
So were there any unique challenges with this site when it came to planning to build this particular building?
It's kind of, I remember talking about the site as like a blank canvas, which sounds like, oh yeah, that's easy. But it turns out, every site comes with its challenges. I mean, the thing about the blank canvas is it didn't have the road that leads out to it. It didn't have, which we ended up needing in the end, like the septic system. And we ended up needing a fire pond to service this park because you have to be able to protect your building out in this landscape with a separate fire pond. It did have water with the irrigation for the surrounding farmlands and vineyards. And so there were certain like infrastructure things that had to be done that the clients had to be willing to invest in to make it happen. But I mean, that also is the very unique thing about it, from Pepper Bridge Road, which is the main highway that a lot of people travel down just outside of Walla Walla. You can't see this parcel, really. You can't see the building, which we found very intriguing early on. Like a lot of the wineries there, we kind of did our precedent study around Walla Walla. We're like, what's the landscape we're working in here for other wineries? I mean, owners were very interested in that too. That's their competitors. And one thing was like, a lot of them were kind of plopped along the highway, right there. And this was like, okay, you got to go out and discover this place. It's hidden kind of in the vineyards. And turns out people love it, to be kind of off the beaten path. You're secluded, whether you want to, have a private event there or, participate in one of their chef weekends. I mean, I think Aimee mentioned that earlier. They launched for 2025, the like spring, summer into harvest, all of their kind of tasting events and private kind of chef events for the year. And it was a matter of like 10 or 15 minutes they were booked like for this upcoming season. It's become super popular in Walla Walla, which is already a destination for wineries.
Well, that definitely says something, because I've been there. I've been there for spring release weekend, which is nuts. And every winery, in a 50-mile radius is doing some kind of activity. And there's a lot of competition. So to get that kind of response that quickly is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and the owners are very, they were very savvy. They knew exactly what they wanted to do here in terms of programming and events and their vision for how the spaces would be used and what people they wanted to attract. They kind of knew what they were doing, which was great, kind of having that as we were designing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to have to go visit and check it out. Before we get into specific details about the building that's there now, tell me, what was when you were first getting started on this, what was your design vision for this project?
So I think we went out there to the site and walked it with the owners and actually with the farmer too. And then we ended up going for lunch and sitting down and kind of
did some sketches.
We did some initial sketches, and they really sort of had that vision embedded in them. It was obviously the views. The Blue Mountains are directly opposite the site on the horizon.
Along with it's just farmland.
Just farms.
And the wheat fields, kind of changing throughout the seasons.
And then it was clear the approach was going to be a really important thing, whether that's from the road, kind of following the wave of the natural landform. We really sort of it was clear from the start. We understood that was going to be part of what we were designing, that it's this kind of reveal when you get to we were calling it the cove at that point, the project.
Yeah, it's popular. Yeah. Name was.
Yeah. So when you get to that cove and you kind of turn the last bend and you see the building. And then we had this strong idea about the access. So really the approach once you get out of your car and enter the Arbor and how that frames a view all the way through the building out to the other side. So at that stage, we were really looking at those big moves of the big kind of main concept of how we could frame those views through to the landscape beyond, and how the sort of interior elements of the building would complement that. But it was pretty strong in those initial sketches, these kind of sidebars and the access and the approach. And even, kind of the eye height and sight lines, what we would do, on a pretty flat site to sort of emphasize those two, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
Well, that was a perfect lead in. Thank you to my next question. So I spent quite a bit of time, probably a little bit more time than normal, looking at this project because I was just really enthralled. And I'm not going to lie, I'm absolutely enchanted with the entrance. That and a testament to the photographer again for such amazing pictures, because that coming up to that entrance and seeing through the building to that view on the other side is really impactful in a photograph. So I can only imagine what it's like in person. Talk to me about the structural grid / arbor structure of this building and the framed openings that you designed.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's something you kind of notice right when you come around that bend of the drive. You kind of see this exposed structural frame. It's defining the kind of south covered space where that comes right off the tasting room. But kind of broadly from afar, the building is really simple in its geometry. It's a large sheltering roof extending out from the west side where the tasting room is over the east kind of wine garden. Underneath that sheltering roof is a glass box, very simple glass box. Extended off of that is the steel frame that forms that south covered deck or terrace. And that steel frame is tying through like a structural grid that's like primary structure for the building, and then it's tying through to the entry as well. So it's sort of marching out the rhythm of the structural grid to sort of greet visitors as they pull up. I mean, you can actually drive by and sort of look down the axis before even parking to kind of orient yourself. And then we try to do some subtle things like at that really strong entry axis where this grid is kind of extruded out. Well, you're starting about 2 feet lower than where you end up. So this ramp, it's probably 60 feet long or so, is slowly rising up and bringing you up to the horizon where you kind of see across the fields and see the Blue Mountains. And at the same time, the treatment of that ramp is like a decomposed, compacted granite. That's kind of crunching, like creating kind of atmosphere as you're approaching the building. You're entering onto this different surface. And then there's a number of things we do from there. Like that entrance is marked with a sky opening, like it's a cut in the roof where light is spilling down. And then we're sort of anchoring the tasting room at the west end with this large totem we kind of call the chimney mast that's sort of reaching up. It's the main vertical element that's sort of balancing that horizontality of the sheltering roof.
Tell me about some of the material choices you made for the exterior of this building.
Yeah. I mean, the main exterior kind of cladding is cedar siding, and it's a shiplapped cedar siding. So it has like a little 1/2-inch reveal between each plank. We really wanted to kind of emphasize the horizontality of the exteriors in its shape and kind of visual. And then the tone of it, unlike some other projects like Mini Mart kind of has this white lap siding. Some of our other projects have this kind of ebony stained. This one to us really wanted to be very calm in the landscape. So we tried to get like a very natural stain. It does have a stain on the cedar, but it's very like warm, kind of tan tones that sort of pick up what we thought like during harvest season of the wheat fields out front would be very much in line with like the kind of cedar tones of the stain that we used on the siding. And then it's like the glass and the steel. The steel is painted with like a simple kind of matte black finish, but that steel is repeated kind of within the glazing wall. So we wanted the structure, the primary structure of the building to be repeated kind of outside. So it's all kind of the frames of the windows are black. So that's kind of where the black steel kind of comes up. And then there's I mean that's primarily, and then it's the concrete finish on, it's polished concrete floors, very smooth on your feet and you go in. And that concrete ties into the hearth on the west end. And then finally, what you see kind of on the exterior is this plaster volume. It's a cementitious plaster that really picks up the tones of the concrete. It's just a more cost-effective way to do a kind of a monolithic structure where it's not all cast-in-place concrete. Kind of has that cast-in-place concrete at the hearth level that you're experiencing, but the volume is a simple wood frame volume that's wrapped in cementitious plaster. So that's kind of the main vertical element that's kind of literally piercing through the horizontal roof shape.
One of the things that I thought was genius was that you did some things with your design to make this building flexible for different types of events. So I read about it, but tell me, what did you do in your design to give the owners of this facility that kind of flexibility?
Yeah. Well, I think as you know, having been to Walla Walla, the climate there can be kind of at the extreme ends. Depending on the season, it gets really hot in the summer, and then there's quite a bit of snow in winter. There's some like strong winds that come through, and you really want to create a space that you can use as much as possible across the seasons. And part of having this very large sheltering roof was to try our best to create a cooler, shady outdoor space. We knew they would be having events, that range from small scale to large scale, a lot of outdoor based events. There's an outdoor sort of sunken kitchen where kind of invited chefs come and barbecue outside, and that wine garden space I think has really served them well to host all manner of different large scale events and dinners. The other kind of funny thing that we obviously couldn't see coming at all was COVID, and it opened during COVID, which was kind of amazing that we had designed all these outdoor spaces that perfectly worked for the needs of social distancing. So alongside the wine garden, the terrace directly off of the tasting room has retractable awnings, sunshades that they can take back in winter when the snow load is there, pull them out in summer and create areas of shade. The wine garden has a huge outdoor fan. We're just sort of really trying to maximize those spaces. And then kind of as Jon mentioned on the approach through the Arbor, you arrive at this kind of orientation point, that kind of knuckle between the two sides of tasting room and the wine garden. And that space we made sure to design to be really very generous. It's kind of like a entry space in some ways, but we really saw that as a spot where if you're having an event, that's kind of where you get greeted. You're probably going to be served wine from there. You're probably going to be hanging out, meeting people before you go to wherever space it is for whatever event ends happening. So we made sure that it wasn't a tight entry. It was really, something that became an outdoor room in itself.
There have been weddings here, and so the idea of procession, that kind of experience moving through that access, and then out to the south lawn, which is also kind of the big outdoor room where it's fire pit, and I think they have games and stuff out there now too. So they're really utilizing all parts of the site.
You talked about that 60-foot long kind of gentle ramp in the front of the building, and it's funny that you talked about that like procession, because the first thing that popped into my head when you mentioned that ramp was you could have a great red carpet.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
big entrance. Yeah. Um, so you mentioned it, and again, you must have done your homework because you've given me all these easy lead-ins to my next question. So you mentioned the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter, and it is a pretty drastic difference between those two times of the year in that part of the world. Did you have to do anything in particular in your design or materials or systems to accommodate that huge fluctuation? Like extra
Yeah.
insulation for winter, or it gets really hot there in the summer.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we definitely, paid attention to those large window walls and the specs of what that glazing was.
Yeah, that was, I mean, the main kind of move that we were doing is studying the light throughout the year. And there's not big windows to the west. There's some because there's a nice sunset that happens, on kind of that axis past the chimney, but making sure that we could provide shade and shelter when it was
Yeah.
needed. That's the main thing out there.
Yeah, kind of definitely the more passive end of strategies for the space. There's a planned solar array, which still might happen on the big sheltering roof over the wine garden, which should be definitely work well out in Walla Walla. So there's some kind of future proofing that was done there.
I would guess they probably don't have a ton of events in the heart of winter.
Yeah, that's true. They kind of follow the seasons with the winemaking.
Yeah, I think once the snow is, up around 1 or 2 feet, they do shut down for a bit. I can imagine the clients going there and just gathering around the fireplace. But yeah, I think they do shut down for a little bit.
So I watched the video that you sent me for the project, and there was a shot where at that entryway that I love, there was a man raking sand,
Mm-hmm.
which it just caught my eye because I'm like, what's he doing? But then as I did more reading and watching the rest of the video and about the project, I started to get, and then one of your photos had a title, and it was sand and shadows, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, there's a story here, and I'm going to make them tell me what is the significance of this, and how there's some influence on this project. So what am I missing? What did I not figure out on my own?
I mean, I think for us, it was one of the big ideas of sort of framing this view. I mean, I talked about that earlier, like this gentle rise of the ramp. It's really about kind of setting like a new intention. You're going to a new place. Like, wow, there's something different happening here. This might be a special experience that we're about to be a part of. If someone's visiting the winery for the first time or a special occasion, and like material change, and I think like when we photographed the project, I think it was the first time anyone had raked the kind of decomposed granite there. Like we raked it out. I mean, we care about all those things when we do these photo shoots, but it was very kind of just sort of relaxing, kind of zen kind of thing, just to kind of meditating as you rake it out. And it's something they do now, I think, for events. They saw us doing it, and now it's something they kind of like prepare the surface, that people are going to be entering on before one of their, big tasting events or chef events. So there's something about that of like caring for the space. It's setting like a certain atmosphere, a certain like intention about this place that like we feel like it just like goes across the whole project, and like a certain care about a presentation and a feeling of a space. And yeah, the long kind of axial ramp does that from the beginning of this one.
Well, it certainly stood out for me, and even if it was turned out to be an unintentional feature of the project, That was the immediate thing I thought when I was watching the man in the video raking that out is like, oh, that looks so peaceful.
Right.
And it
I think
just,
we are attracted to those kind of things, like the ritual of doing something like that. I mean,
You doing more raking during this?
yeah, we raked out the wine garden too, which is the same material down below.
well, I'm glad to hear that they're continuing to do that, because it's just, there are certain places that you remember, and you remember
Yeah.
them because there is something about that was different.
Yeah.
That was like the cherry on top that made you feel different, or gave you the impression of like these winery owners wanting to give you a different level of experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's little touches like that that are game changers. I mean, I've never even been there, but it jumped right out of the video at me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
great.
Get that
I
video
love
uploaded somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's impressive. So you touched on this earlier, but I want more details. This site, from the pictures I looked at, and I know this is probably not the case, but it appears from these pictures like it is truly in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw, one or two homes around far away from the site, farmland everywhere. And so, like I said, you mentioned earlier, you had some services you had to bring in. So what, in more detail, tell me about what services you had to bring in, and what kind of work that added to the project.
I mean, I think it was one of those things where it's kind of happened, I guess, maybe a little bit from the get-go with a project like this, where it's clients that are building their business at the same time, and we have to kind of like suspend disbelief a little bit, and trust that they know what they're doing. And when you see a site like that, and it was a fairly budget-driven project,
Right.
and you see this untouched site, and in your head, there's going to be a ton of money from that budget for the building that has to go into the infrastructure. And we had some moments of being like, do they understand like what this is going to be? How you're going to have to build a road that goes around this whole landform. But to give them credit, they, I think they had considered all those things, and understood that would have to be done in order to make a building in a special place like this, and were on board with that from the beginning. So I think in a way the challenge was more our end to kind of really trust in the process and trust our clients that they knew kind of the extent of what they were doing on a project like this, which is a pretty big undertaking for anyone, let alone someone who's starting a business at the same time. And they really, I think they kind of took it head on in terms of managing a lot of that part of it with the contractor, who they'd already sort of established a relationship with fairly quickly. I mean, they chose a builder that has done wineries in Walla Walla in the area before, was used to working in rural areas like this, and had a big commercial team that could get a road done and get infrastructure in, and it wasn't a big deal for them, and do a cost-effective amount.
Credit to the clients, like me saying, and we've worked with a number of clients like this over the years that really stand out. Like at every turn, they're like ready to face the challenge. I mean, we go out for a site visit, and the clients along the new road planting trees, out to the new structure. Like that's the kind of people they were ready to do it. So, and then we also teamed up with a really great local civil engineer that helped for a lot on the side of like, details for the road that were submitted to the county, and the fire pond, and locating the septic. There were a lot of things that had to, with the site planning, that had to be worked out with the civil engineer. They were really great in that role. So what they do. So finding that person was key to the kind of site planning as well. It wasn't all on the architectural side.
And it's funny, I was going to ask you about the road. When I was looking at the pictures, I thought, did they have to put in a road? And I thought, no, that had to have been already there.
I mean, it's a
Probably for the farm.
driveway, but it's kind of a road. Yeah. I mean, it's a gravel. Substantial, yeah.
That's I knew when I looked at that site, It's like there's no way. And I thought maybe they have water, maybe because it's farmland. But outside of that, and I get exactly what you mean, Aimee. Because my first thing would be like, oh, that's going to be a chunk of change. Like, are you ready?
Yeah.
Especially when you said they had started out looking downtown.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Where none of those things would have. I bet you they're glad they made the decision they did. Though.
I mean, a huge leap that they made, and I think they're happy they did now.
Yeah, definitely.
Terrifying. So how did the permitting process go for this project? Were there, I've encountered on some of the interviews and projects I've seen, when you're putting kind of one of these things is not like the other kind of thing in the middle of all this farmland. Sometimes there's challenges in getting the zoning you need or permits that you need. Did that process go well?
It was very smooth. There was nothing crazy that happened with the permit. So much so that it's hard to remember. But yeah, there weren't any issues on that.
Most of the issues were covered in that site plan early stages with the civil engineer.
Yeah, I think on the architectural side there wasn't, we were fine doing what we were doing, but it was getting all the civil elements,
the fire pond, making sure it's the right size, the septic system,
the parking requirements.
Those were like the main things, which we were involved in, like a general layout, but the specifics of it.
And as we were, because Walla Walla is very accustomed to these kind of projects. Yeah, there are wineries popping up all over. They had pretty clear, I think, information as to what we would be doing, for the numbers of people that were using the space and whatnot. So once we had the right civil engineer involved, and it wasn't anything wild by any means.
Well, that's nice to hear once in a while, because that's not usually the case.
I know.
Yeah. There's always a building department story. What about sustainability goals? Anything in particular that you did on this project?
I mean, we talked a little bit about kind of the passive strategies, the sheltering roof. We did light studies kind of for the project. Natural ventilation, like, is handled pretty well, like on 3 sides of the structure for the tasting room. We have like easy access to the roof, and like have wired it for future solar whenever that happens. I think it's kind of a budget driven thing, but I mean, a big one too is like having this way to monitor light from the south with the retractable shades that we talk about. I know those feature, like, if folks are looking at the photographs, there's a lot of great shots of those. Again, those were kind of worked into the structural grid on that south terrace.
And they were kind of, I mean, this isn't a sustainable thing, but we had those from a fairly early stage in the design as this concept of something that kind of softens the view of this building as you round the corners of the wave, and it's not this sort of harsh architectural element, but the kind of natural flow of these awnings, which kind of like wave sort of in the same form as the landscape and move with the wind, was something that we thought would be both like a memorable visual for people, but also like, kind of in the landscape creates that little softening of the architecture.
Let's go inside the building. We've talked a lot about the outside because I was just so enchanted by the whole place. First, give me a broad description of the spaces if I was walking through, paint me a verbal picture of what I would see walking through this building inside.
Yeah, so you kind of turn and face sort of west when you're in the central courtyard space, and you enter into kind of the main bar seating area. They didn't really want like a fixed bar. They wanted kind of like a back bar, so it just felt like it's like part of the architecture almost, not a place that you would stand around. They wanted everyone to kind of feel welcome, just to find a seat, whether it's inside or out on the terrace, but not someone that sort of everyone stands at and sort of faces away from the seating area, which was really interesting. I mean, I think initially in the sketches we had like the bar set up, but yeah, they were very kind of emphatic about how they wanted that set up, which we liked kind of how it turned out. You look beyond that area. Oh, and in that kind of main seating area, it's marked by this tapered skylight that's right at the center of the tasting room that you can kind of look up and through. That's lined in like a white plaster, so it really reflects a lot of light down into the space. And then when you look past that, anchoring kind of the west end is the living room, and it's just like cozy seating around the what we call kind of the totem, the fireplace and chimney at the west end, really marking that end of the structure. Lots of cozy seating. I think it's like the biggest isokern fireplace that you can get. Isokern's a type of masonry fireplace that we got for this project. We even emphasized that even larger by like how the fireplace is sort of articulated with this hot rolled steel panels around the fireplace, with little storage for wood and kindling and books and art objects kind of around it. And then supporting that space are 2 bathrooms off to the north side, and spaces you might not walk through but exist. Also on the north side of that tasting room wall are like more service spaces. The mechanical, they've got a big prep kitchen and storage space back there. And a little office space. But that's mainly it on the interior. And all of that kind of looks out to the south. Everything's kind of a backing to look south across the landscape, across the fields, kind of in the immediate foreground, and then the Blue Mountains beyond, framed by lots of glass around the tasting room.
I had wondered about a kitchen. I was thinking, okay, they have events, but I either I missed it or I hadn't spotted that anywhere. And I was thinking, okay, how are they? Because there are some tasting rooms you go to that are strictly tasting rooms. There's no food served.
A lot of it is outdoor. Yeah, they have a real outdoor kitchen.
Green eggs and like a big barbecue outside, but then they do have the prep kitchen inside, which is nice.
So tell me about some of the finishes that you chose for the inside of this building.
Yeah, I mean it's quite simple in a lot of ways. We really were trying to draw the eye out of the building, out towards the views on the south side, with all the kind of glazed area. But we've got polished concrete floor, utilitarian in a lot of ways, but looks great. The ceilings kind of flow from inside to outside, a clear cedar. Have a lot of warmth to them, so that makes that interior space feel very kind of cozy in winter and nice and light and bright in the summer. Then there's the concrete and the steel and the plaster at the fireplace, oak cabinetry in the sort of back bar zone, and that kind of goes up to emphasize the passageway. One of the things that we sort of actually was a little bit of a challenge is like, the bathrooms are back there. We don't want it to be just this doorway in the middle of a wall.
Right.
And we kind of used the sort of extension of the cabinetry to kind of frame an extended doorway. So it became more of an architectural moment, even though there's a lot of back of house back there. It doesn't look like something forgotten about.
That's really true. We fought to have kind of articulated that way. So it'd be like a special moment as you're going to the restaurant.
I'm leaving too.
And the clients treat it that way too. They have like a little side table and a mirror and some art there. So it's cool to see the clients kind of responding to something you kind of gestured with the architecture.
And then, the rest is kind of complements with furniture really in that space. So it's a fairly straightforward palette. But yeah, we really just want everyone to look outside.
I would choose that over something highly detailed and overly ornate any day of the week.
Okay.
What would you say, for speaking about design right now, was your biggest design challenge on this project, and how did you solve it?
I mean, part of it, I think, came from kind of, as we've mentioned a few times, that this is new clients, new business. There was a little bit of initial back and forth and questioning over what this building should contain. Were they going to have production facilities here? They were, in wine school. They were doing production at a off-site location where they were renting space. So we did master plans for kind of future elements of this project. At one point, we had production kind of in an extended bar where the wine garden is. And this is even kind of built so this space could be enclosed, the wine garden, if needed in the future. So there was some future proofing done there. But really making sure that the site master plan could accommodate future buildings if needed. We talked to them about using other of these small coves that are further down the waveform. So I think there was a little bit of like battling what was going to be here because they didn't really know how the business would go or how things would grow. So we eventually kind of got there, and it sort of got simplified, and it kind of worked out in our favor, I think, with the simplicity of the structure in the building to make it what it is now.
I remember another design challenge like early on. We kind of mentioned the blank canvas site and just being like sort of struck by that. Like, there's nothing to kind of like nudge up against, like, and respond to, really,
Right.
because it's just this cove, and there's no, large fir tree here, or really like a setback or a building
like,
there.
where does this go?
And so that was a challenge early on. And we even started it with that lunch we had with clients where we were sketching out like, forms. Is the building broken into two? Is it one single? Is it oriented east-west? And I think we solved that by just constantly kind of creating the experience of like driving up to it, walking through it.
Like enough space.
Remember we did like sketches. I don't, Cherise, you may have these sort of vignettes of like what one would see, almost like a frame from
Arrival.
film of like Arrival, how you would experience it like in a series of quick sketches. And that was us kind of thinking through what is it like to arrive with this place, to be in it. So that was an interesting thing to try to solve, like this new building in a pretty open, blank kind of landscape. Lots of cool things to look at, but not a lot to kind of like inform what would be there. So it really was digging into that kind of experiential nature of it, and then the program, like Aimee mentioned, with clients.
Well, one of the, I think, nice things about having that, and I get exactly what you're saying, but having that blank slate is you get to create the moment. You get it without anything taking away from that.
Yeah. I think it was sort of daunting at first. It was like, oh, wow, better get this one right.
Well, that is the first time I've ever heard somebody, an architect, mention to me that they actually kind of sketched the frames of moving through the building. I've seen all kinds of sketches over the years, but that's an interesting way to look at, that conceptual planning. I'm not an architect, so that would never have crossed my mind. So I find that very impressive.
Definitely, like, I think a professor said to me at one point, like, it's going to be very exciting when you build your first structure, but remember, things get built, and so you better stand behind it and be ready for it. So, anyway.
Yeah, your name's attached to that for a really long time. Great advice. So I have worked on projects in the past in rural areas, and any project in a rural area comes with its own kind of unique set of circumstances, because you can't just run down the street to Home Depot or whatever for some emergency fix. Everything has to be brought in, or you don't always have skilled labor nearby. And so it can be much more expensive to get the people you need in to do construction. I know that you mentioned that you had a contractor familiar with this kind of work in the area. How did the construction phase of this project look? Did you encounter any challenges in bringing that all together when you were out, kind of away from immediate access?
We obviously, met the builder and run through the project with them, but it was definitely, his operation was a different scale, I guess, than what we've been really used to working with on our residential projects. And he'd done a lot of wineries, but they weren't necessarily the sort of level of detail or style of this project. And so we didn't know exactly how that would pan out necessarily. There's some unknowns there. But it ended up being great. Like I think, I don't know if it's just because of that type of operation. It's you can't, they build what you give them.
Yeah.
And they ask questions when they need answers, but they're not kind of just going cowboy on you and doing whatever they want. They really built what we drew. And we were pretty impressed with the efficiency and the speed of the project. And it started right before COVID, and they were done in like 8 months or something crazy. It was
very
one of our fastest projects. And
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, testament to them. Mountain States construction.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know Aimee said we were a little nervous at first. You always are. Someone you haven't worked with before. We hadn't built anything with them. And I remember one of the first conversations with the site supervisor when they're on site is running through the plans, particularly the concrete plan, and asking a series of questions. And I got off the phone after like a 20-minute call with him. I was like, this is going to be good, because he was asking all the right things, very detailed, going through all the like top of concrete elevations everywhere. So I was like, this is going to be great. I mean, that's what you want, just someone that's, especially the site supervisor, such an important role. That person's there. They're a big part of your team, to realize this, and someone that's going to communicate effectively and get into the details. And I mean, yeah, we were super impressed at every turn with those guys.
What would you say was, for each of you, your biggest lesson learned from this project that will make you an even better architect on your next one?
I think sometimes, like, the longer we've been working and doing projects and working with different clients and budgets and whatnot, I think there's a danger that you can get a little bit like bogged down with those known elements, kind of like we're talking about with the infrastructure and costs and like whether something is really doable. And that can sometimes take away from dreaming and like concept and kind of really being truly creative on a project. And sometimes you just gotta take that leap and trust that, to an extent, that you can make this project happen, or at least keep the essence of those big concept moves on a project that you kind of are so excited about at the beginning, and take them all the way through, and not kind of constrain or harness yourself from the beginning because of your expectations of, oh, this might not align exactly with the budget. I mean, obviously we've all got to think about budget at a certain point, but allow yourself to kind of have that creative mode at the beginning, and because it can lead to really amazing things, and clients can surprise you and contractors can surprise you. And I feel like you got to have that strength at the beginning of a project to really let it sing and have its essence, that even if it shifts and budget constraints come in, that's what sticks throughout, I think. And these guys, like, yeah, we did have questions at the beginning, like, are they really going to build a winery? Reach out to them and be like, yeah, they're going to do it. They're going to do it. This is going to happen.
Sounds like a great lesson to me, though. Getting that reminder. What about you, Jon?
I was just thinking previous answer with the contractor, the site supervisor. It may not be unique to this project, but it's still a great lesson. Like, especially during a construction phase, to be flexible about your approach to like how you're going to manage this, how you're going to like meet expectations for what the project needs and wants to be, and what the clients are after. You mentioned kind of like rural settings, contractors, a lot of times they're managing multiple jobs. They're in their truck, bouncing around, and like, how are you going to communicate with them effectively? And so we talk about that a lot. Like, it's setting up those kind of parameters early in the construction. Like, okay, we're gonna meet Tuesday, via phone. We're gonna talk through all the questions that you have for the upcoming week. Just kind of setting what fits, this particular contractor. If it is like a weekly 20-minute phone call and that's all that the budget allows, or the contractor can, just make sure that like, I think just like talking on the phone, you can cover so much, with contractors. Sometimes in remote settings, like, they don't want to see an email, like, every morning from you. They might just want to talk through some issues. So I think being flexible through the construction is such a key one for our work. And I mean, just the way we work, we want to be known for that. Like, we can come up with creative solutions and still be flexible and easier to work with.
Yeah.
Not combative with like our builders, and they really are our bullpen, our team that is making it happen.
Yeah, we're not going to live or die over a certain detail necessarily.
Right.
Everyone has kind of a limit, but we really want to be flexible and collaborative to make the project the best it can be, rather than us dictating you must do something this way when we might not, be the ones to do that.
And maybe that it is the right way to do it, but at least we've like talked through, okay,
Right.
This is their side of it. This is what we see. And usually we can find the right answer that way.
Well, I will tell you, every contractor on the planet that hears this is going to be wanting to work with your firm. But I do think that's an area I've always felt we can improve in this business. I think our contract model almost sets architects and contractors up to be at odds sometimes, or makes it harder. But it's true. The two parties are providing two different things. And that thing is not going to happen unless those two groups come together. And so I really wish there was more of a respectful and thoughtful relationship like that on every project.
Yeah.
Before I get to my two closing questions, tell me what GoSee is working on now that I get to call you about and have you back for in the future.
Yeah, we hope so. We hope they turn out well. No, they're going to. Well, we should mention, because some clients visited this winery, Aimee was talking about that before, we are doing a new, approximately 4,000 square foot residence, just outside of Walla Walla, because they saw this, they loved kind of the feeling of it, of the space, the materials, the living room aspect, and so, a couple that will be kind of retiring, leaving Portland and building a new house up there. We're about to start. It's going in for permanent right now, but it's a really cool. It's also kind of another blank slate site. This is kind of up on like a little ridge. Has incredible kind of views. It's a courtyard scheme, a sheltering kind of hip roof that has a big donut hole in the middle, that everyone kind of enters through this protected courtyard. Very focused towards the east and southeast, to views the mountains again. But yeah, we're really excited about how that one's turning out. Another one, we're still doing a little work on it. We're doing a little work on site right now, is on Orcas Island. It's a really fascinating project called Isle Air. This one might be one you want to talk about in the future. We hope it is. We're very excited about photographing it in a few weeks. It is a artist studio and gallery and artist residence. So a small apartment. This client wants to invite artists from all over the world to go to Orcas Island. They can live and work right in East Sound, Washington, which is the downtown portion of Orcas Island, and then display their work to the community kind of at the end of the artist residency. It's an incredible program that she started.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that's the first structure on that site, is the artist residency gallery studio, and there probably will be a second one that we're working on in the future. Very excited about that one. There's a little bathhouse. We've done a lot of saunas. We did a floating sauna early in our careers, like a little over 10 years ago now. We're doing another. These clients have an amazing site on the Hood Canal. 2 little cabins, like a little main cabin, kind of guest house. And then we're going to do a third structure on the site that is the kind of bathhouse retreat. It's 2 soaking tubs, an interior kind of 7x7 sauna, indoor outdoor showers, little water closet, changing rooms. These clients are amazing. It's a second home, but really they use that second space to invite all their friends over on the weekends, and like everyone meets out there on this beautiful site that kind of looks up the Hood Canal. And this little it's like a little fire lookout tower, the way it's structured. This bathhouse will kind of look up the Hood Canal, like framing views of that, and it's going to be a really, really cool one.
Yeah, and then we're going to be photographing probably in the autumn a project on the Olympic Peninsula, which again is kind of this wellness focus where we were working with these clients again, building a business. They decided to start like a sort of glamping resort with the small one, where each kind of custom tent, large scale tents that house a king size bed would have its own bathhouse, sort of looking out to views of Strait de San Juan de Fuca, shower, bathroom. And so we designed several of these little bathhouses and then a main cabin for them, to manage the property from. So that one is complete and up and running, and you can go and stay there.
Yeah, that one's called Minazai. It's on our website. There's some renderings and that site sections of it on the website, but they also have a website, so you can check out.
Photographing that one soon. So.
Well, if any of these wellness spa glamping people need me to come inspect, I am happy to take one for the team and go check it out.
It's an amazing spot.
Maybe that's a prerequisite for our next podcast. If you feature that one, you got to go out there and stay at the space first, and then we can talk about it. And that would be cool.
I've actually there's a conversation going on right now about possibly doing that at the Portland airport. I interviewed the contractor.
That is a beautiful structure. Yeah, that turned out amazing. Yeah.
That'll be fun.
I interviewed the contractor during construction about that project, and I am. This is secret, so don't tell anybody. Except for when they listen, they'll hear it. I'm going to be interviewing the architect on one of the concourses coming up here pretty. I mean, we're in the process of scheduling the date right now, but then the mass timber people want to go out there and do a videotaped interview about the mass timber. And so I might actually get to go on site and do an interview on site. So, I'm happy to do that for any of these spa type of places as well.
Sure.
Or that I've only been on Orcas Island once. Ironically, it was for my honeymoon. But I imagine that's going to turn out to be a pretty cool project. Too.
Yeah. We've been excited about that one for a long time. It's going to be great to get it photographed.
So final two questions, broad industry questions. So, we talk on this podcast a lot about the challenges that we face, because I think that's where we learn the most on our projects, are the things that are hard. The things that are easy. But the hard things are where we have to flex those muscles and stretch the brain and be more creative to make them happen. This being a rural project, and some of my own experience with rural projects, I was curious what lessons you learned, what advice would you share with someone else to help them start off on the right foot if they're doing a project that's kind of off the beaten path where all those services are not readily available? What advice would you give to another architect taking that on?
Yeah. I talked a little bit before about communication, flexible communication with especially with the site supervisor, the person on the ground there. The other one that we were thinking about, we talk about this a lot on projects, is being really clear, concise, consistent with the drawings, the construction documents, and the specifications. I don't know if I've said this before, but imagine you didn't have any construction administration. You just get to pass these drawings and specs off. They're going to build what you've detailed, what you've specified. Make sure it's very clear in your communication, and potentially a broader move is for a project like this, maybe you're not as involved on the day-to-day kind of oversight. From an architectural standpoint, simplifying the complexity of how the pieces tectonically go together, how it's assembled on site as much as you can.
I think we've definitely learned on some of these projects where the builders maybe not so familiar with the type of work that we design and build, that you've really got to be careful not to make assumptions about how they might interpret something you've drawn, or how they might build it, or how the people that they work with might build it, because more often than not, they might just do what they want. So having early conversations about those key details, the key assemblies, even just making sure how that roof is going to be built, just because they see it on paper does not mean that their roof is going to do it like that. So I think we've learned that, getting on the same page. And if they're going to do something different, how can we accommodate that? Does it make sense? Can we adapt? So
one other, I didn't jot this down earlier, but I was just thinking, and we tell our staff this, I mean, just about maybe I can say every project is in Revit now. We have it modeled, like include a little snapshot on those construction documents where you're doing details, the window wall or the thresholds, like, or the cabinetry. Like, so often now we're including 3 kind of snapshots right on that same page, so that builders, subcontractors can quickly look there. Then, I understand what they're after here. Then go into the details. Which we're finding more and more could be like a really successful way to communicate in the documents.
yeah.
Fantastic. That whole answer spoke to my soul, especially the properly prepared contract documents part, considering I'm a spec writer.
Now we got to live up to that.
I'm going to be checking. I'm going to go look up your project. And
we have heard recently an appreciation for our details, which is always nice to hear from builders.
So final question, it's changed a little bit since the first time you were on. A couple of people did not appreciate my world domination statement comment. So it's like, I'm sorry, I'm still going after total world domination. So the question is, we all hope to live a life that leaves some kind of contribution to make the world a better place. So personal or professional, small or large, what do you hope your impact will be?
Should I start this one? I think, because we've done this podcast once before, I think I did a more personal one last time, but professionally, and maybe this is a small impact, but I think it's one you can't really quantify as much. And I mentioned earlier, we've got a new studio space. It's probably twice as big as our last one. We built it out. We tried to create like a very kind of just inspiring space for us and the staff, like our team, to be in. And I think we've talked about this recently, and maybe architecture offices sometimes can feel stuffy or like, I don't know. We want to create the opposite of that, like a relaxing space where everyone feels comfortable about sharing ideas, laughing, not taking yourself too seriously, but taking the work seriously, kind of thing. And the impact being, as I look back on some offices that I've worked at previously fondly, and have been inspired by, it makes a big difference in one's trajectory and like career. And if you have that experience and maybe some of our team members create their own offices one day, and like they think back about their experience here in like a really positive light. I think that's really important. Like they have to spend, and we have to spend so much time with each other, and we're here a lot, like make it like a good experience. We're trying to do that more and more with the space and like how we operate, like with project critiques and everything, like our lunch meetings where we all sit down around the same big table together and share ideas from the weekend or travels. So like we creating that kind of atmosphere is really important to us.
Well, you'll be successful if you do. How about you, Aimee?
I think like on the professional side of things, kind of like we were saying, over the course of a career as an architect, especially in a small office, there's only so many buildings that you get built, and the scale of them and the types of clients like ranges pretty wildly. And I think we've always been very conscious and hope it, as apparent that even our small projects can be something special. And, whether that's a moment or a detail within those, even if it's like a little kitchen remodel, that there's something special to that thing that you're working in every day or touching every day. Or it's these much larger projects where you can have a big impact from, far away, like Alton Wines. that we really put our all into each of those projects. And it's not, oh, this is a small project, it's not got a lot of budget, we're not going to be able to do anything interesting, let's just get it done kind of thing. That we try and find those moments where we can, and give everything that same level of attention. Hopefully that has an impact on the clients and the people that go into those spaces, and see them as thoughtful pieces of architecture. So.
And to add to that, like, you've been to a wedding at Core Cellars, right? Didn't you go to a wedding there?
I officiated a wedding.
You officiated a wedding there. And then we also had some friends. Were you at that one too?
No.
That we did have some friends that got married at Alton Wines.
Yeah. But that is pretty easy to officiate a wedding
Out of space.
Place brand of space you design. I think it's something that is pretty memorable.
I mean, that's really cool.
Well, there's not many. Funny, Amy, we have that in common. I also officiate weddings. I mean, you can't like hire me on the internet. I just do it for people I care about. But I think I did wedding number 5 this last fall.
Oh, wow.
But that's a special day, and to get to experience your own project.
Right.
On somebody's what's going to be one of the biggest days of their lives is, I imagine, pretty impactful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that they appreciate these spaces enough that they want to be there. And
it was really cool.
Moment.
Jon and Aimee, truly, you two are one of my favorite guests. You're welcome back anytime to talk to me about any project you're working on. Thank you so much for coming back and putting up with me. And sharing this awesome project, which I will be, if I get anywhere in the neighborhood of Walla Walla, I'll be checking out. You guys will get a text from me with pictures. Guess what I'm doing?
All right. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was fun.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.